Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today in this beautiful morning in Rio de Janeiro. And I would like to start already to kick things off by discussing what the name of this talk implies. The secret to startup hypergrowth. Let's talk about growth. That's what we came for, right?
Yes.
So I would like to start with Gerry. If I remember well, as of 2021, you achieved unicorn status, and that was faster than any other Latin America startup on that time. And I see now you have big clients in Brazil. I was checking, and they are getting more and more. Can you talk about the pace of revenue and transaction volume growth that you are currently seeing, and what exactly is driving it?
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa, and it's great to be here. Bom dia, bem legal estar aqui de volta na cidade maravilhosa. And thank you, Patty, Web Summit, for putting this event together again. Yeah, I mean, Clara, we've been blessed with having an awesome growth trajectory so far. Most recently, FT named Clara the fastest growing company in the region by our most recently reported audited financials. And I think it comes back to, I mean, three things. Like one, it's like starting with the product, and we were talking very much about this backstage. And you know, for us, it was a pain that we as Latin Americans felt ourselves. And you know, we're building essentially like the product that we would have loved to have, you know, in previous experiences, in fast-growing startups, like many here in the audience, or you know, in like the business that I saw my family work on, you know, over many decades, or others that you know I helped consult for, and you know, I think it's important to like start with that initial inspiration and insight. Second, for us, it's been key that you know we are from Latin America, for Latin America, by Latin Americans. And it's really about like compounding for like, you know, it's not just making a product from a different region of the world accessible here, but actually focusing on everything from the ground up, like how do we best serve our customers, you know, companies in our case here. Really like just even very basic things, like if you're gonna have a corporate credit card in Brazil, you want it to be, you know, issued in reais. You want it to be able to pay in parcelados, like the local buy now, pay later installment scheme. Of course, you have to support boleto payments and PIX. And then on top of that, you want to like build your software, the technology, which I think is like the third thing where it ties very nicely to you know the kinds of companies that my co-panelists are building, where you know now we have this platform, you know, over 20,000 businesses, hundreds of thousands of users, hopefully some in the audience, you know, you can raise your hand. I think we saw a few hundred people that paid for their Web Summit tickets with Clara. But now we're building a lot around AI and workflows, right? So you have all this data. Every time that you upload a receipt on Clara, we can parse all the information in that ticket and you know have it available in a structured way. Every spend that goes through the platform, we basically have a financial analyst that accompanies you as a company. You know, workflows like invoice intake, like automatically recovering invoices. Like these are tasks that are normally taking teams, you know, countless hours of very tedious work, and it's very exciting to be able to automate that with AI. And I think my co-panelists have a lot to add on that too.
Yes, it is interesting what you just mentioned, affordability too, and that's, I think, in our minds when we think about expansion in the region, it's key also. Now, Vidya, about DataSnipper. Last year, you reached 1 billion valuation, and invested in geographic expansion, also jumped into an acquisition. It's Uplink, a new platform. So next year, at this time, what's going to be the biggest milestones you expect to be talking about 2025?
Love that question. I think that this is such an exciting time for fintech, for Latin America. I think in many ways, Latin America has been role modeling the openness for very innovative financial technology. So a year from now, one of the key things that I would love to come back and talk about is what a great presence we have created as DataSnipper here in finance and audit technology with customers in Brazil. Because it's only been a year since we have broadened our footprint in the Latin American market and really committed to the region, but we're doubling down now in Brazil in particular. hiring more people here to support our customers who are already in this region. Also, we're very proud to have a Brazilian investor on our capital table. It's Monashees, fantastic venture capital firm. And so we are very, very committed to Brazil and the broader Latin American market. And a year from now, I hope to tell you more stories about that.
Well, I cannot avoid asking, what is your next step in Brazil then?
Yeah, we are hiring, so definitely check out our upcoming open roles. So we have a lot of customers here, including the Big Four, but also large corporations in Latin America, and we want to make sure we have people on the ground serving them in their language, understanding their local needs, and so that's very much part of the plan of continuing to grow and expand in the region.
Very interesting. And David, so we were talking just now, you've added 100,000 new accounts each week, I guess, in Latin America, and you have like 75% of the Fortune 500 companies using your products right now. I found very interesting to see with AI's new features and integrations into the tools that we usually already use in our workflows, such as Zoom, Teams, Slack. And can you talk about this underlying technology that is built, that you are building on, and what difference is it making right now?
Absolutely. So what we do that's a bit different is back in 2021, we were all in meetings on Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, and a lot of times you had this meeting fatigue where meetings after meetings after meetings. And what I started to notice was someone was wearing glasses, and I saw the colors and I recognized the colors and I said, hey, that's similar to my screen, and I was on ESPN.com, and they were on ESPN.com because I could tell. And so it really got me thinking, can you actually understand sentiment and engagement in real time using technology? And so we started to understand when are meetings good, when are meetings bad, and that started to go in and build the foundation to do meeting summaries. And in terms of Latin America, the growth that we're seeing, we're growing about 20, 30, 40% depending on the country every single month in terms of the number of users. And the reason why we're seeing that growth is we did a study about a quarter of all Brazilians that are knowledge workers have said they hate meetings, there's too many of them, it takes away from their day. And so when you think about AI, the adoption has really been around what's the simplest use case, and one is I don't have to go to meetings and take notes anymore. I don't have to go to meetings that I don't need to, and I can just send the AI instead, and that frees up a lot of time.
Yeah. All of the three of you just mentioned some interesting keywords, I would say, about Latin America. You mentioned first affordability, then how this region is key for innovation and is open to everything that is new that we're bringing to the market, right? So let's talk about the region. Host is here. Vidya, let's start with you also here. You mentioned just that you expanded in Latin America. You have an office in Mexico. And tell us why that time was ripe for automation of audit and finance there. And what else? You already mentioned Brazil. Are there any other countries here where you see potential in the region? If not now, then down the road?
We find that the office of the CFO and audit space in general is very much the forgotten back office. And these are teams that are mired in a lot of manual work. And the way they've been solving these problems is by hiring more and more people. But meanwhile, in the industry, there are fewer and fewer accountants joining that as a study in colleges. So there are fewer graduates. So you have growing amount of work and regulations. You have fewer people to do those jobs. And so the moment is ripe for automation because you have to figure out a way to do more with less. And meanwhile, you have all of these political changes and tensions. And Vanessa, you and I spoke about this briefly backstage. But this only increases the complexity for compliance. And so for us, it became a no-brainer to have to bring products to market that ease this problem for our customers, to automate as much of this painful manual work so that they can focus on the more strategic aspects. We are very proud to be a Dutch-founded company. We're headquartered in Amsterdam, but we find that the problem we solve is globally universal. So the way an auditor conducts an audit at the principal level is the same in Tokyo as it is in Buenos Aires, as it is in Sao Paulo. And so we have a product that really can be used globally. And it's why we serve the global Big Four, KPMG, PwC, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, but also the largest networks, largest corporations globally. And so that's been a huge part of why we chose to come to LATAM and why we're continuing to grow our investment here.
Yeah, it is, I'd say, a region that definitely has a lot of opportunities, but also challenges. And we can go a little bit there also. I think that's important. So I just have data here. According to the Association for Private Capital Investment in Latin America, so VC investment here in the region stabilized last year. And we could see startups in Brazil and Mexico receiving the biggest chunk of it, right? And now, Gerry, if we think about what are the implications for the ecosystem, and should this be a cause of concern for startups, the evolution of investments that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think when one takes a broader view, take more of a step back, it's just incredible the progress that we've seen in our region. I think if you just look at the last 3 or 4 years, it looks like we're down from a peak in like 21, early 22. But really, like where we are today, last year, where things are trending this year, it's you're seeing investment levels that are higher than what we were seeing in, like 2018. Certainly a lot higher than it was 10 years before that, when actually I was starting my first company in the region. So, I mean, I think it speaks to the growing opportunity in the region that now has been proven out by several players, some publicly listed. But there's still such a long way to go, right? Like when we compare ourselves as a region to the US, it's still a relatively small percentage of the stock market or GDP that is from tech companies. And there's just so much that needs to be disrupted. Certainly financial services, being such a bedrock of a functioning market economy, being a prime opportunity and the one that we're in. So I think we're extremely bullish overall. I think it's healthy to have a little bit of these cycles, because it forces companies to focus ultimately on what really matters, which is delivering great products, services, experiences to customers, to do so in a way that is going to be long-term sustainable. And so, that has been a big focus for us also in the past 2 years. And, now that you have, those solid foundations plus, a product that gets, it's like, being taken up very quickly by organizations, like a combination of growth and good economics means that, I think, the companies that have gone through this cycle are going to be in like a great position to become the next great compounders in the region. And I'm excited to see more, the Nubanks, Mercado Libres in the region.
And you just moved your headquarters to Brazil, right? You wanted to make this your largest market in Latin America, if I understood it correctly.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we shifted. I mean, we started Clara early in the COVID pandemic, and Diego, my co-founder, and I, we had actually been in Sao Paulo with a previous startup, and ultimately we ended up launching in the Mexico market first, but we launched in a way that it was very easy for us to expand, to Brazil and Colombia, and as soon as it was practical, we shifted our headquarters to Sao Paulo. Though I'll also say that, as a very inclusive, regional company, we actually have folks working in 12 countries in the region. My direct reports are in 4 different countries across the region. So that's, it's been exciting to build a company that way.
It is. So how moving here benefited, the company, and also we were talking about the challenges. What do you think? How do you think we are going to be impacted?
Yeah, I mean, Brazil's an incredible place, and when we think about financial services, there's a regulator that's very forward-looking, and Brazil's really leading the region in terms of adoption of digital payments in many ways. It's also a country that produces its own gravity, right? It's like so large, it's over 200 million people in a region of 600. For everyone who came here from a different part of the Americas, probably the halfway point between here and that journey was somewhere inside Brazil. So it made a lot of sense that Brazil is really more than other countries in the region, the ones like driving Clara's innovation forward, and then because we're a regional company, the innovations that maybe start here, like we can very quickly take to our operations in other countries.
Mm-hmm. And thinking globally, we are seeing economists saying that global growth will slow down. We have Trump tariff policies. We have escalating trade war, raising the prospect of a recession in the US. Vidya, my question to you is, what steps in this environment, as soon as you're expanding so much geographically, what are you taking to guard against the risk that some customers, could tighten their belts or some curtailing orders? How are you preparing for that?
I see both challenges, but also some silver linings in all of the tumult that we're seeing in the market. One of the challenges is when there's so much change and volatility in regulation and markets itself, generally decision-making comes to a halt or it slows down because people are nervous about making additional commitments when there's so much up in the air. So in many ways, one of the key customers that we serve are government organizations. Governments are one of the largest auditors in the world. And what we did find is that the US government, for example, came to a standstill when a lot of the DOGE initiatives happened. Now, on the silver lining that we see is when there are more regulations, there's actually more scrutiny on financials, and the audit process becomes more complex, which makes it even more important to use technology and AI to do it more accurately, to do it more efficiently. And so, in many ways, audit is not optional. Like taxes, you have to do it every year. And there seems to be only one direction that the complexity of audits are going, and that's only increasing. And tariffs and regulations only increase that. And so we do find that we are seen as a resource, as a boon to help auditors and finance teams navigate this very fast-changing, complicated space with a little bit more ease.
Yeah, I see the point. And also, I wonder, David, how all these shifts that we are seeing, how it's changing the tone of the device that you receive from VCs. So, and that's actually a question that I wanted to start with David, but also for all of you, how has the tone changed?
From an AI perspective, the tone hasn't really changed that much in terms of it is a space that is growing. It is a space that is continuing to outpace tariffs, taxes, any geopolitical, AI is the macro event that's happening. And to give you one example, when we did a study for Brazil, we actually found that, 68% of Brazilian knowledge workers are actually using AI in their work every single day, but only 31% of the employers have ever trained them on it. So that's just going in and saying, okay, 31% of people have been trained, but 68% of people are actually going out and saying, I'm going to use this for work, I'm going to learn how to use this. So I think there's a big macro trend there versus that's kind of ignoring the rest of those trends that are out there in the space.
Yeah, do you see the same way?
I would agree with David, but I see an increased level of urgency. AI has completely exploded people's ability to build products within a fraction of the time. And so in many ways, now is the best time to enter any market because you could do it better, faster, more efficiently with smaller teams with less capital than anyone else before. And so the tone is very much of urgency to innovate, to build, to continue to solve problems better than anyone else because competition is not far behind.
It's also a way to navigate,
yes.
to better navigate. Gerry?
Yeah, well, like Vidya, we have a few great Latin American investors, including Monaxis, Kasek. And I was talking to one of the investors on the Midas list of the best VCs in the world. And they said something I thought was really curious, which was for the first time in my 20-year investing career, I'm seeing a flight to quality to Latin America, which is interesting. And I think it says to possibly this being a great opportunity for the region. As some geopolitics are shifting around. Though more specifically, it really is kind of what is each country's relationship to the U.S. because it is the U.S. specifically questioning, I guess, the world trade order that it itself helped establish. And when we think about the region, it's actually curious that there's two extremes between Brazil and Mexico. Brazil, as we were saying, it's produces its own gravity. If there's a country that can operate in autarky, it kind of is Brazil, self-reliant in many ways. And it is, curiously, one of the few countries and the largest country that buys more goods from the US than it sells. So, it's a country that seems to have a lot of leverage in that sense. Maybe why, in reciprocity, it actually asks the U.S. for visitors for a visa, which is pretty rare. A lot of countries decide to not do it. And then you have kind of the other extreme in Mexico. And I grew up in kind of like that border area between Mexico and the U.S. near Texas. And, we talk about nearshoring nowadays, but for me, that's actually been the evolution of my life. Because I remember, when I was very young, Mexico was much more like Brazil. A lot of things were domestically produced, for the domestic market. Today, that region is basically the most integrated of any two economies in the world. Like, more trade happens between Mexico and the U.S. than any two countries. And I think that's been to like mutual benefit, right? And if anything, like the U.S. has benefited more. And so, overall, I'm like optimistic that trend will continue. I think people will realize the long-term benefits of, comparative advantage and trade. And I'm hopeful, going back to that VC's comment that, this second half of the decade will be LATAM's time to shine.
And just real quick on that, we're seeing in the US, our global footprint is about 50-50, but the growth in Latin America is something that the US investors are actually going in and saying, this is unique, the cost per acquisition is lower. And so they're actually going in and saying, invest heavily in this market. There's a really unique opportunity where the US companies aren't necessarily spending as much time. So I think anyone here has the opportunity to really grow out a business without as much competition as you would have in the States.
That helps. Well, Latin America scenario looks interesting, and in the middle of this global challenge, apparently big bets here. We need to finish this to end this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all these ideas with us, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.